Have you ever randomly met really cool people and wished you could get to know them better? That's it. That's the show. Welcome to season 2 of I Am Not Prepared podcast. So, good morning, Dee. Thank you so much for sharing your time with me today.
Good morning. I'm happy to be here.
Do you prefer Dee or Danielle?
And D is fine.
Okay.
But it's good for people to know that D is for Danielle.
It's such a gorgeous day, and you were my Valentine this morning.
Hey.
You were my first up close and personal conversation on Valentine's Day 2024. So thank you for being my Valentine. And I'm digging the color in your background too, because it does spark joy and passion.
So I'm sitting in my studio space right now, and I chose this color, which is like a orange color. I was trying to paint the walls a color of creativity. They were this color that wanted to be purple but wasn't quite. It was like a purple grayish uninspiring color basically. And so one of the first things I did when I started using this space was paint the walls. So yeah.
I was putting together a reel of my Singles Awareness Day 5-year anniversary single, right? And I came across our picture together at Albany Center Gallery, and
Yeah.
I thought, God, in that piece of work that I purchased, I have two. I've got one in the living room and one in my bedroom. And I have gotten through the podcasting experience. My studio was my bedroom, and that is a prominent piece in my bedroom. Hip hop to infinity, by the way. 50 years of hip hop. And I've gotten so many compliments and comments have discussions have started from, pre and post. What is that? And I thought, that's D.Colin. And so when I came across that picture from the show, from the hip hop show at the gallery, I was like, God, what a great memory for me. How did you, speaking of 50 years of hip hop at Albany Center Gallery, how did you enjoy the show? What was your impression of that particular show?
The show was great. And I've been going to Albany Center Gallery for, to see different exhibits for a while. And there was a lot of people at this opening. It was, I think they clocked it at like 400 or 400 something. And the art itself it was very, like there were vibrant colors, and it was very nostalgic. And I think my favorite part was the subway, the installation that DJ Master did in the space, and people could tag it and sit in it. And it was like you felt like you were in New York City. Um, and the performances also, I think, that was a great way to accent the night, that it wasn't us only looking at visual art, but we were also experiencing performance and engaging with poetry and rap and breakdance. And I mean, it was like all the elements of hip hop in one night. So I really enjoyed the show. Um, yeah, I really enjoyed the show, and I'm happy that it happened, Yeah.
As a community member, it was really fun to see. It did my heart so good on different levels. As a someone who lives downtown, I love seeing people in my neighborhood. And then, of course, we know the gallery is doing fun things all the time. Um, a lot for free, as a matter of fact. So artist receptions at the gallery are free. If you ever want to meet an artist at a show, come to an artist reception. As a matter of fact, Bloom is on this week, so at that gallery. It was really nice, like you say, the sheer number of people was, and people who were excited. And I've had an opportunity to speak to some neighbors and other, patrons since then, because it was such a large, impactful show. And it seemed to be on the hearts or affect the hearts of the people who came. I'm not even a huge, like, nostalgia wise. Yeah, I remember Sugar Hill Gang. Like I'm old enough, right? Right? Like I know stuff because I've been around for a while. But to see the love and the joy, especially for people of color, that has been one of the it's been one of the things I think you and I have discussed that too about getting folks of color into art spaces. And that's why it was thrilling to me, just thrilling to me to see so many people come out from wherever and enjoy that show, relive if you're old enough to relive some things, and to
Mhm.
see folks take, on that history, the history being honored and all of that. And for ACG and all its sponsors to host that show like that, it was very meaningful. And all of the celebrations across the US that happened through the summer and fall and stuff too was really amazing. I cannot speak highly enough of that particular event. And for me personally, it's so many people of color in an art space. And that brings me to, it's something that I always try to ask to get it from, I don't want to say the horse's mouth, so to speak, but to speak with creatives, makers, artists, of color, who that is sort of a concern. It's a part of life, is how do I get more people of color into art spaces? What's your take on that? How do you feel about the current state of attendance and participation in art? And
Mhm.
then how it's received in the public for people of color?
Um, there's that scene in Mo Better Blues, um, when when Shadow says, give the people what they want, the people will come. And I think it's that simple. It's really like what are art spaces offering people of color culturally? How is it culturally relevant to their own lives for them to engage with the art? And that's not to say that we shouldn't also step out of what we know to experience new things, but for people who haven't gone to an arts space, how do art spaces engage with them to bring them in, right? So that they can experience the thing that is culturally relevant to them, but also, oh, here's this other thing that I'd never seen this before, and I think I kind of like that, or I have questions, or I want to be in conversation with this kind of art, because sometimes we don't know what kind of art we like until we interact with it. And I think that's part of it. I mean, because there's art spaces in the Capital Region. There's the Art Center of the Capital Region. There's Albany Center Gallery. There's all these other small galleries. People have shows at Shore Night Out. There's a show that happens every Shore Night Out in someone's apartment. There's different things that can bring people in, but um, I think sometimes it's about finding what's culturally relevant and also making spaces accessible. Um, if there's like workshops, is it accessible to everyone? Can anyone apply to this? Is the price bracket for this workshop, accessible to folks? Is there a range? Is there, there's different things that can exist for more people of color to engage with art, because people of color are making art. They're making art. Sometimes they're just not showing it anywhere, but they're making art, they're writing poems, they're painting, they're doing all these things. And sometimes the knowledge of how to enter these spaces isn't as accessible, or the draw to enter those spaces isn't as appealing. It's just, I think there's ways to engage for more folks who look like me to, go into more art spaces.
I love that answer. I I keep getting a unique response every time I have this discussion, which isn't every day, but it feels like the responses are unique, and they're really well thought out. Obviously, someone being in your position, I hadn't thought about putting the onus on the space. That kind of duh. Forgive me. Well, there's so many challenges for anyone, for the patrons. Sometimes there's an accessibility issue for the patrons. Sometimes people just don't know something exists,
Mhm.
right? So, and then obviously for the creative, it getting into the spaces. So how well are these spaces or programs being marketed or promoted to everyone, in a fairness environment, an inclusive environment, diverse environment? Interesting stuff. Have you felt, I don't know what the right word I'm looking for is, uncomfortable, or have you had a negative experience? Um, when we talk about race and art, or whatever, ethnic and cultural backgrounds, have you ever felt uncomfortable in an art space before, either as an artist or as an observer?
Yeah. But I mean, I have felt uncomfortable, not necessarily as an artist, just as a Black woman in a space, you know. So um there's that part, you know. But I don't let that stop me from going into spaces. You know, I go into spaces that um maybe I'm, you know, maybe I'm the only one, maybe I'm one of three. You know, I go into those spaces deliberately. Um and I learn what I learn, and I take up space. And for me, I think that, you know, part of folks engaging with my work is me showing up, you know, in spaces where they wouldn't expect me to. And that's not to say that, you know, I go into spaces where I'm expecting harm. I'm going into spaces where there aren't that many of me, because I think representation is important. And I think that if I'm not there, or someone who looks like me isn't there, then how are folks supposed to engage in the conversation? I need them to engage in the conversation. And so I show up for that purpose. You know, and that's, you know, that's as a visual artist, that's as a visual artist displaying work in galleries, that's as a poet going into schools where there might not be a lot of students that look like me, and teaching a workshop. You know, there's different ways of me showing up so that my story and what it represents is part of the conversation, you know? Because I think it's really important for younger folk to see that as well, you know, like going into a gallery and seeing a painting of a Black woman with a huge fro. And it does something to a
Or
little Black
meeting
girl.
one?
Right. That just does something. It's like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was possible, you know, or I see myself in this, you know. Or like I remember I did a workshop in Vermont, and the school where I was a guest speaker at, there was one Black girl in the room. And the room, there was like 40, 50 students in there with their teachers, and everybody was white. And she was the only one. And I was like, oh, okay, I know what poems I'm doing. And I did all the poems that I wanted to do. And we did a writing exercise, and you know, and everybody wrote. And but I remember her coming up to me and saying, thank you. And that meant a lot, because you know, she saw herself in me, you know. And so um yeah, race comes up because, you know, of the lack of representation sometimes, or I'm aware of the space I'm in. And I'm also aware of, like sometimes people don't know, or they didn't do their work, and then they say things. And then I have to course correct, and so there's all of that kind of discomfort. But me showing up and taking up space and representing so that other folks who look like me can do the same thing is for me, that's worth the work, you know.
I'm glad that you related a direct experience because it does happen. It's little by little, which for any societal change, it takes one person continuously choosing to step out of their comfort zone and kind of build a bridge, or as you said, I have learned the value, and I hate to say it that I've learned so late, but I've really put a time and focus on my personal value and believing in myself and advocating for myself and the power that comes from advocating for oneself. I feel like it's been a blessing to be around a great deal of progress for women and people of color, but I feel like there's so much for me personally. My journey has so much farther to go as a woman. I'm gonna keep some of my stuff I think is related to my own womanhood, and there could be ancillary reasons as well. But I've noticed that a lot of my when I look at my life and I reflect at some of the choices that I've made, I've allowed things to happen around me instead of stepping into sort of an offensive or a leadership role in my own life. And so making decisions to appear in places where folks like who look like you may not be. When you said Vermont, I was like, heck yeah, because that is, I think Vermont is historically the has the largest of such a small state. It's mostly white. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but that is what you've done is this step, especially with this topic or under this context. You need a person needs to step into that to sort of mix in, for lack of a better phrase, and highlight what's available. Because I think when we talk about accessibility, I feel like, and it's all about the advocacy and the belief in oneself, is I did not realize how much was available to me as a person, as a woman, as a mixed race woman, or however I want to identify. I didn't realize how much exactly was available because to me, until I started to kind of throw off some of those societal norms out of my psyche. Why am I doing this thing? Because society tells me to.
I'm reading In Search of Our Mother's Gardens by Alice Walker. It's taken me a while to finish. I've been saying I'm reading this book for a long time now, but she opens the book with an essay. I don't remember the title of the essay, but the essay opens talking about Van Gogh, and he's he's painting, but he has no models for what he's trying to paint. And and Van Gogh, I don't know how many people know about Van Gogh's life, but it was pretty tragic. And he didn't actually sell much of his work. The way that we engage with Van Gogh's work now, like it's taught in schools, and like there's a traveling show, there's an immersive experience of Van Gogh's art. That none of that. He sold like one painting while he was alive. Um, and in the essay, Alice Walker goes on to talk about the importance of models, and if it's that for Van Gogh, then what for a Black writer, what like who were the models, right? And this is like Alice Walker writing in the 70s. So if you're thinking about the legacy that we can reference, like we have to kind of embody that in the present so that future generations can have a reference point, and people who are in the present can have a reference point. It's a very, I don't know, it's really about showing up.
Do
really
you feel,
about.
do you feel a responsibility
I
to
do.
to whom do you feel responsible to show up?
I feel a responsibility to myself, first and foremost. Like I have dreams, and then for me, I think showing up for my dreams, is the best gift I can give myself. So showing up, I have a responsibility to let the little girl of me dream and to chase those dreams. And then I feel a responsibility to the people I represent in my work, and that's Black people, and that's Haitian folks, and that's women, it's marginalized groups, and I feel a responsibility there. I think that um, I think that doing this work, I don't take it lightly, because there are generations of us that weren't able to be artists. And in the way that we are now, you know they were creative, they found ways to be creative. That's why we have spirituals, and that's why you can look at you can go to a museum, you can look at a piece of carpentry, and the artistry in the carpentry is like nothing you've ever seen before, because Black folks just found other ways to be creative, even if they didn't have access to the arts in the way that we have access now. And so for me, like, there's a responsibility to honor that, um, by doing the work that I'm doing, by honoring my own creativity. So there's that. And there's this quote by Nina Simone that I really love, where she said, an artist's duty is to reflect the times. And in that sense, I feel a responsibility, like what's going on in this world right now, and how do I discuss that in my work, and how do I bring awareness to things that people might not know, or how do I shine light on a story that leads to some kind of healing, or leads to peace, or leads to a new way of thinking about something that maybe we have to unlearn, right? So I feel responsibility in that sense too.
That brings in a really interesting question too, for those who may not have been exposed to your work yet. How would you characterize your work, or what's your point of view? What would you like people to know about your point of view behind your work?
I would say that it's Pan-African, which is to say that it's Black. It's Black despite ethnic background. It's the motherland Black, it's Haitian Black, it's American Black, and I very much want to dispel stereotypes, but I also want to celebrate uh, who we are culturally, and that shows up a lot in my work. It shows up a lot in my visual art. It shows up in my poetry. Uh, People, I think, know, if you've engaged with my work at all, know that I represent Haiti a lot in my poems. And my first book is an homage to my Haitian heritage. So I explore existing Black in this world a lot in my work. And I also I'm also very engaged in what my experience has been as a woman. And I also, especially particularly in my poems, I've explored trauma, and healing, and what that journey looks like or has been for me.
It's a lot, and you probably have a deep pool to draw from.
Yeah, I mean, I've been writing for a while, so.
As we keep living, our experiences just keep collecting, and they shape and grow who we are as people. And so sharing, experience is the best teacher, right? So I really enjoy the idea of storytelling through art forms. If I can begin to look at the story being told, just exploring my own creativity, I enjoy a well-told story, and that may take different types, different shapes, or different forms. And I like that, honestly, in art, I like the choose your own adventure. I like that it's a lot of it is subjective, unless I'm being informed of someone's experience.
Mhm.
Then, when I look at, that's why I like abstracts a lot too. But I also like different, many different styles of art. Um, I wanted to definitely, it's kind of exciting for me because I know that you deal in the African diaspora quite a lot. Like it is a major point of view, and it drives and informs your work. So, it's February, it's the United States homage to Black history. What do you, I know it's such a general trite question to ask you what Black history means to you, but I guess the real questions behind that, the subtext behind that is like more like, what does it mean to be Black? What is it? Because as I said before, I'm mixed race, raised by a white woman. So those are the roots that I know.
Um, that's
I know,
that's a
right?
that's a big question. I mean, well, for one, I think if we're gonna talk about Black History Month, um, the history of it is important. I know like people joke and say, "Oh, we have the shortest month" and all that. But it used to be a week. Originally, it was Black History Week, and the week was in February. And so when it got extended to a month, February was the month because the week was already in February. But the importance of having it, like Black history is American history. But when Black history isn't treated as American history, then that necessitates this kind of like, let's designate some time to actually delve into the history that's been neglected, right? And all these years later, it's still important to have some time to highlight the stories. For me, Black history is every day. Black History Month is every day. I can celebrate Black History Month from January to December. And I don't really need February, but coming up in school, I can understand because I think in education, particularly the time that we're living in now, where books are being banned at an increasing rate and education is being censored. I just read an article the other day where parents were sent home permission slips to sign for an African American speaker to come speak to a class, which is I don't know where we're going with that. But that's the reality that we're in. And so I think the Black experience and Black History Month are separate things, but they're both significant. Until Black history is treated as American history, it's not a paragraph on slavery. It's not posters of Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King on the wall and boom, we celebrated Black history. Until that happens, we need Black History Month. until it's actually like, yeah, this is what this person did and this person did, and this is why we have this. This is why we have the traffic light and peanut butter. And there's just I think there's such a wealth of knowledge that folks haven't tapped into that is available, for people to look into. And having, I don't need a reminder, but some folks need a reminder that, there is a wealth of history here that they can engage with and understand, just like any other history. But the Black experience in America for me, it's joy. Um, it's um, it's creative. Um, it's unapologetic. Um, and it comes with its own weight, right? It comes with the generational trauma that we have to unpack. And particularly when we're reminded of oppression in this country, either as individuals or as a collective, you know. And when I say as a collective, that's you know, for example, I remember when I was in middle school, I remember Amadou Diallo being killed by the police. I remember that. Um, and as a Black kid, I was like, oh wow, you know, that that happens. But I have memories as an adult of that kind of police violence on Black folks, right? And so that's part of the experience, but it's not the whole thing. I see Black folks as I see the Black experience as one that is resilient, one that really overcomes all that's like thrown at it. I see it as soft, as well. That it can be tender, that we care for each other, that we love on each other, that we celebrate each other. I mean, if Black folks can celebrate somebody by highlighting the color they're wearing. Okay, blue. Okay, red. There's like we have a way of celebrating
Yeah.
that I think is integral to our experience. And it's in our music, it's in our food, um, it's in our culture, it's in everything that we're doing. We weave in this embodiment of light and joy and celebration that I think is necessary to survive. And not just survive, but to thrive as a people together, and towards progress. And we've made a lot of progress. I'm not saying we haven't, but there's still a lot of work left to do. And I think that we're pretty badass. We're pretty bad.
I could not agree more. Just admittedly, as an observer to the Black experience, it feels like not to treat any one group of people as a monolith necessarily, but when we really do the deep diving through history all the way up to today, it does. Black folks seem like an oak. It's almost like I liken it to womanhood in a sense, because it's like you have to be almost unrealistically strong. Like no one should be asked to give or have so much taken from them as an individual or as a collective, a culture of people. So I maybe incorrectly liken the struggle. I don't know. But it's important to find relationships everywhere. That's my point, is to understand the interconnectedness of humans. The importance, especially in where we're at as an American society, not to tamp someone else's experience, to uplift your own. And you know what I mean? Just everyone is what, and that's one of the things that I like about living in Albany in particular, is everyone's really invited to the party. There may, that is an observer's point of view. I'm new here, but I've never really experienced like a disinclusion or an exclusion, I should say, of any. I feel like if you're willing to contribute, bring your gifts. And maybe that's because I've chosen to surround myself with kind of free thinkers, artists, makers, that kind of thing. I've never seen someone say, no, you're not welcome here. I absolutely know that happens. I'm not that much of a Pollyanna. But what I'm saying is I have experienced a lot of giving from people of themselves, the generosity of people. And it could also be that I'm in a place in my life to receive it finally. Like I have a psychological room and emotional room to receive the generosity of spirit that I've been given here. How does it feel to be asked about your Blackness? Does that strike you as insulting, or do you have any negative vibes about it? How does that feel?
Um, I'm never insulted. Well, I won't say never. It depends on the question, I think. Um, and how can I say? Okay, so when people are curious, right, want to honor the curiosity. But I think there is a way to ask a question or to inquire respectfully, or inquire and it feels genuine, doesn't feel like a superficial question, or I'm not made to feel like a token, or
Yeah.
made to feel like some kind of exoticism, object, so it's just, so if those things are not present, then yeah, I'll talk about my Blackness, but I have been in situations where I'm asked about my hair, for example, and in the process of asking of the question, then there's like a hand in my hair. Like that's not, I don't, let's not do that. let's let's not do that, right?
Well, and what's so funny is it's just, and I don't mean to interrupt you because you're making really great points, but that's just a personal boundary issue. Like
Right.
I look like my mother, who was a beautiful woman, rest her soul. But having kinky roots was like, it was, people didn't know how to people didn't know how to treat me. They're like, there's something going on. It was racially ambiguous. Like we can't figure it out. So I got a lot of like stares and leers, with people really trying to lean in to guess what I am, right? And so that I finally got to a point later here recently in life when I sat down to tell that story. It's very emotional even then, because all those many years, we're talking 40 years later. And but it sticks with it. And I am not trying to hold any present day Black folks accountable for past day children's actions. It's not about that. But what has come to life for me in my maturation and my experiences is that's one of the things that I need to replace. Like it's not about replacing the whole experience, but incorporate a lot of positive present day experiences to create a better mashup. And it's important, my friends know this, like, my everyday friends know this, but I feel, even today, I feel slightly awkward sharing experiences like that to someone who has lived a 100% Black experience their whole life. For me to say that I was traumatized by some stuff, the color of my skin too.
I mean, for me, I think it's about our human experience, right? And so, like, yeah, I had 100% Black experience, but um I'm also the daughter of two Haitian immigrant parents, and I spoke English at school. I spoke Creole at home. Creole is my first language. And so I had experiences growing up where it was like, oh, well, you're Black, but you're not Black, right? And so there's different levels to it. And so that's why Pan-Africanism shows up so much in my work, because we all Black. It's not just about, oh, my parents are from here, so we're less Black, or I think, and there are distinctions culturally, right? I mean, there are cultural experiences that I have as a Haitian American, that my Black American husband hasn't had, and vice versa. There are things that he talks about that I don't know. and that's okay. But that doesn't make either one of us, it doesn't diminish either one of our Black experiences in this world. And so that for me, it's how are we genuinely showing up to the conversation so that we are sharing our human experience. And and that includes the complexity of things, because we are complex people and there's different layers of us, and there's different layers to the experience that we have as any part of our identity, right? And so I think it's important to just lean into genuine curiosity, not the kind that's like, oh, well, you're not like me, so it's like, no, like, let's see. Oh, okay, I didn't understand it that way. Okay, now I understand a little bit more, or this kind of relates to this thing. Is that, am I reaching? Or I mean, can we have like human conversations about who we are, what we've experienced, how what the commonalities are? And if it's different, it's different, but that doesn't make it less. You know what I'm saying?
Right
Yeah.
on. I feel like coming from a place or reaching within the value of reaching within yourself to draw upon some of those more harsh experiences that might have been formative for you to create, for me, to create the bonds with other people. But if I see deficiencies within in knowledge, if I just have seemingly no relationship and someone's willing to share time with me, then of course I'll ask them about their experience. Because what I've found in my sober life is if I can't be directly helpful, I might be able to direct someone in need to someone who does have that experience. That is so valuable. And I think that's something that, yeah, we're used to having our network and our friend groups and all of this stuff, but the value of saying, first of all, I don't know is a real, correct, valid response.
Mhm.
But here's my friend D, who I think shares some of your experience, and she may be able to impart. That is huge.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, I don't, not stopping and trying to go one extra step on someone's journey, hold their hand for one extra step to release them to someone else who might be helpful. It saved my life. Stuff like that saved my life. So it's important to me to be able to pass that along, because I feel like we're all links in a chain. We're all, if we're not physically holding each other's hands. Well, I mean, we see it all the time, like when there's natural disasters. I lived on the Gulf Coast. So you see communities kind of spring around each other when the need is so great and deeply impactful. You see people come together
Mhm.
that would not necessarily mix, but there is a huge need that is threatening the society around us. And so sometimes as an American, I'm like, why do we have to wait for things to get really bad? Why? But that's neither here nor there. That I'm just grateful in my prayer life. I just say a prayer of gratitude that actually does happen still. We have
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
crossed the line where we can no longer feel empathy for other people or sympathy for other people. So with your permission, I'm going to switch gears because I did not plan on being
Okay.
emotional.
It's all
Sorry.
good.
I'm just a what is it? I'm just a spirit having a human experience,
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, just because of my own curiosities, as we discussed right before I hit record, I did want to ask what your feelings are, or what your perspective is about, turning your passions, things that you're honest to God good at, and we're going to talk about your projects, turning your passions into income streams and learning to what that feels like to either become reliant upon money in your art to fund your life, or to fund the drive to continue to make art, if that is the case. But What do you feel about incorporating the concept of money in art?
I have strong feelings about this.
Your time to get emo.
Um, because a lot of my experience as an artist, making money from my creative practice has been an unlearning process.
Hmm.
It has been an unlearning process. I started selling artworks. I've been drawing like my whole life, in painting and collage and pastels and watercolor and all kind of visual art my whole life. But I started selling watercolor pieces um, to raise money to go to uh, a creative writing retreat for writers of color. Um, it's called Vona, and so I got into Vona, and I needed money to because it was in California in Berkeley, and I had to pay for my flight and all these things. So I was like, oh, I need money, and um, I got this idea to sell my work. So, so I was just like painting all these watercolor pieces, and I was just selling the work to make whatever money I needed to go on this trip. Um, and I've been selling my work ever since then. But every year, I get a little more confident in pricing my work. Um, there's some folks that got pieces from me that I love, and they paid a small amount of money because I had all this conflict, and I was pricing out of inner conflict and instead of confidence. And a lot of that comes from the ideas that we, learn over time about uh artists. Starving artists is a trope for a reason, right? And so so, that I didn't grow up in a household that looked at any kind of creative practice as, oh yeah, you can do that. You can grow up and be an artist. I grew up in a household that was like doctor, lawyer, engineer, pick one. And it took me I had a roundabout way of arriving where I am now. It took me a long time to say, no, this is what I've always been doing. I've always been creating something. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to do for the rest of my life. And so if that's what I want to do for the rest of my life, I'm gonna have to find a way to monetize because I mean, I live in this world and I have bills and I have to figure out how to eat and have a roof over my head and all the things, right? So if that's the route I want to go, I have to figure out ways to monetize what I'm doing. And in doing that, it's not about what I feel like pricing something. It's less about that. It's more about what life do I want to live? And that's a larger question, right? If I show up to an interview and I'm asked about my salary requirements, this is a normal question in the workplace. It's what salary do you desire? And I don't think there are enough artists asking themselves that question. Like it took me a lot, for me personally, it took me a long time to arrive at what salary do you want to make, D, as an artist, as a poet? How do you what do you want to make in a year? And why do you want to make that much in a year? What is it for? Are you just want to pay your rent and your utilities? Do you want to actually go on a vacation? Like what is the salary covering? And when I answer the question that way, then I arrive differently at my pricing. And then the other side of that, aside from my own personal growth, unlearning turmoil of hey D, you can charge money for your art. it doesn't have to be just so people can send you on a writing retreat. It can be and live, right? The other part of it is advocating for myself, because I'm also when people book me to like go into a school or come into their organization to do a workshop with their staff, or come and perform at this place or whatever, or come and open for these this group, or whatever the thing is that they're booking me for. There are sometimes people show up to that conversation ready to compensate an artist, and pay them what they deserve, or pay them generously, right? But that doesn't always happen. Sometimes uh, folks who don't know, I'll give them benefit of the doubt, don't know, will offer less. Sometimes folks will offer exposure and no money at all. And I think that comes from this mindset. It's a mindset of value system of how we view artists in our society. If we value artists, then it will be translated in how we compensate them, you know. But if we're like, oh, this is like, that little thing that you do, can you, you know,
Yikes.
it it's cringe, but it exists. You know what I'm saying? I know, like, we just like the Super Bowl just happened, and every year the same articles come out where people are like, the artist didn't get paid for the halftime show. No, whatever. It's every year it's the same articles, right? But the folks that are performing at halftime at the Super Bowl can one afford to not get paid at the Super Bowl. Also, the viewership of the Super Bowl is actual exposure. It is actual exposure that leads to sales and streams and general income for the artists that showed up to perform halftime. What I'm talking about is, the local artist gets booked to do to perform at a fundraiser, and the exchange is, well, you'll get exposure. Exposure to who, and how does the exposure then translate into income? And so for me, that's not payment, right? And so I think in general, um, society needs to unlearn some of the concepts or attitudes that we have toward artists, that we're not, we're not just out here just like, I don't just paint all day. Or like, I mean, I'm also emailing, and I gotta, market myself, and there's the website, and I gotta build this. And I spend a lot of time doing administrative stuff in order to get paid so that I can live the life that I want. And I shouldn't want that less only because I chose a creative path rather than I guess a traditional 9 to 5, right? And so there's that, right? And for me, that's really the exchange. It's just, I'm doing this work. The work is to inspire. The work is to uplift. The work is to heal. The work is to educate. And there's value in that. And in exchange for that value, then yeah, I want to live. I want to live.
I think that's totally fair. And so many things were screaming in my consciousness when we were talking. I was, first of all, this is what social media has done to creatives. You've got people who, I enjoy creating content because I like the creativity of content creation, if that makes any kind of sense. And I like people and relationships and things like that. I'm not selling anything. I have no profit motive personally for any of the things that I put online. But that complete societal rot, that social media, the rise of the influencer, And so how we perceive, as people, the exposure thing, I find that I'm insulted for you. First of all, I'm insulted for any artist who it's not their freaking first day to get paid in exposure. You know, you have this whole body of work. Everyone I've talked to, Ryan Leduc, Oscar Bokran, Alex Waters, they have a whole body of work that dates, most of the time, pre-social media, right? Or pre-smartphone, pre all this stuff. You talk about exposure. I do understand the idea, but the word exposure translates in my consciousness to entry level. And I don't think that that is, my humble opinion is, I don't think that that's fair. I think if I were to hire an artist, I would look at their body of work and select them, because their body of work speaks to the event or whatever it is, the message that I would like to convey. They're already conveying it. Let me plug them in and use their experience if they're willing to share.
Mm-hmm.
It's so hard using, I mean, I'm telling you, it's so hard using art as a business. I don't even, I feel, that makes me feel silly saying that, but you know, as an observer, that's why I told you before we hit record, that it feels like two different competing sides of the brain to incorporate capitalism into creativity and how to do that. And what's been interesting for me is to hear the different takes on it from the creatives. You know, one has one foot in the W-2 world, another has 100% in the creative world. And so there's different strategies, and I like the perspectives, because sharing that helps others make a more informed decision about what they want to do with their life. And that's why I love these conversations, is because these are real people doing it, and it is not easy. Nothing is easy, but turning your passion into dollars is especially not easy.
Mm-hmm.
And I respect much. And
Yeah.
go ahead.
What I will say also is that like right now I'm rethinking what does it even mean to be a full-time artist? You know, does that mean that I'm only self-employed? Can I be a full-time artist while also working another job? You know, does that make me less of an artist? You know, it's just I'm asking these questions of myself, you know, and I think that, you know, there multiple things can be true, right? And I know for myself, if I take on if I become an employee somewhere, whatever the work that I'm doing has to be aligned with the work that I do for myself, you know. So and I've used that practice for some years now. Ever since I left my full-time teaching job, if I took on a part-time job, it had to be aligned in some way, you know, with the work that I was creating, because then it was like, oh, this is actually enhancing it's adding on to my creative practice. It's not taking away from it. And I think that's part of, for me, that was part of why I needed to not work full time for someone, was because the time I was investing in that job was taking away from the passion I had for the arts. And so, you know, when I flip it, it's like, oh, if I'm working, if I have an employer, that's an income stream for me. But is it adding on to my creative practice? If it is, then yeah, it makes me an even better artist. Yeah, it's in alignment, and I'm okay with that. It's then still a full-time artist, right? So um there are ways to do it. You know, there are ways to do it. It's, you know, some ways um can have there are ways to do it, but each way has its own challenges, you know, and then having to navigate around those challenges. But yeah, I, exposure is not exposure is not in alignment with the vision that I have for myself.
City of Albany water. I would like to pay you an exposure.
Right.
And just play that tape through. Like, yeah, you're not like at home eating baguettes, with a little hat on.
Right.
Like, studio space costs,
Yeah.
materials costs, everything
Yeah.
costs. And
Mhm.
and so yeah, as an artist and creative cheerleader who's out there, and a non-artist, but a cheerleader, the price is the price, folks.
Yeah.
And if you would like to become a collector, you're gonna have to pony up. It is what it is. Because
Yeah.
it's insulting. If I see it as insulting. If someone wanted to lowball me on something that took 50 hours, whatever, I would personally be insulted, and I have no problem being in the position that I'm at to correct that whenever I see it. It's not a junkyard. We're not haggling. This took time.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, I'd like to wrap with a couple of things because this has been super awesome. We're going straight through, no edits. So it's been really, really cool talking to you, and I could do this all day. That's another reason I've chosen this outlet for me is there's a lot of good constructive gold in creating connections with people. And so I do want to, speaking of art, I would like to go into what projects you have in the works or anything you'd like to highlight.
I currently have a show at Schenectady High, um, and that's till March 15th. I'm not exactly sure in the process of being able to see the show because it's in the high school, but it is there. And then I'm working on a solo show. The show was supposed to happen in April, but I've had a hard last few months health-wise, and that's caused delays and having to regroup and and catch up with all that administrative stuff we just talked about. So I've postponed that show, and you know folks are gonna have to just stay tuned for what the new dates are for that. But yeah, I have a show at Schenectady High right now, and then I'll have work at the Spring Street Gallery in Saratoga Springs in April as well. As far as performing, um, I'll be at Oakwood Community Center next week. Um, and performing is, kind of like whoever wants me to perform. I travel for poetry, I like to say.
I've seen that. You've
Yeah.
been around the last few months. You went
Yeah, I mean, I've been a lot of poetry has taken me to a lot of different places, which is a blessing. It's taken me out the country, and so I've I've uh I've had a lot of fun experiencing new places, because I'm here because of poetry, right? It's just really cool to say that. And the memories and connections that I've made with other people through poetry has been awesome. So there's that. And then I'm also at the Fish Market.
Oh, yeah.
And the Fish Market is a community art space through the Art Center of the Capital Region. I've been in that space in some form capacity since 2022. I was an artist in residence, and then an artist through their NEA grant, and subsequently became the curator of the space. This iteration of the Fish Market, I'll be doing some curation and of art and programming in the space. So that season starts in March. Um, yeah, I think those are the major things that are happening right now. And I'm just kind of like taking it one day at a time. You know, because I have to also be okay physically to create. And I think that's also something that, I've talked to other creatives, and I'm moving away from that hustle culture. It's really moving, I'm really leaning into rest and what that looks like for me, and wellness, and self-care, and what that looks like as a creative, because I don't think I can create work consistently that I'm proud of if I'm not well.
Okay, I like to end these things with three ridiculous, innocuous questions. And you can, like I said, you can decline to respond if you want, but it's not that serious, but it's kind of a lighthearted note. Um,
Okay.
so the first of three is, do you prefer sunrise or sunset?
Sunrise. Yeah.
You
That's
don't have
my
to, why?
that's my quiet time. It's my quiet time. I actually get up before the sun. And I like to make some tea. I like to light a candle. I sit with my journal. I write for a little while. I might read something. It's the time that I use in the day to ground myself, to center myself, and to, give myself space. I also, I like to be in a room alone. I think there's power in having some solitude where you can just listen to the thoughts in your mind and your heart and check in with yourself. So that's what I do for me. Is that's my check-in time for me. Um, and I'm not the only writer that does it, because Toni Morrison, God rest her soul, used to also get up before the sun. And she talked about this in an interview, that getting up before the sun was when she could talk with her characters, And so I don't know, there's something about that for me that, works really well, as far as like getting some thoughts down and writing. Yeah.
Powerful. I echo that. I actually do not spend the time alone. I enjoy the silence before the noise of the day. And I mean, this is just as I'm getting myself ready. So I share that with you. I don't have a specific meditative period. Perhaps I will enter a season where I appreciate more of my 24 hours on an individual basis. But there was a time in my life that I needed a practice such as that, and it was very healing and reflective and worthwhile for me. So I hope to get back with it. There's no reason why I'm just not doing it. There's no reason why I'm not, but I understand why you are doing it.
Mhm.
Secondly, do you have a favorite sitcom? Do you have a favorite TV show? And what is it?
Oh, um, wow, that's a hard question. Um, that is a hard question. I like so many TV shows. I just finished Fargo,
Okay.
and I enjoyed it. Um, I I like True Detective. Um, yeah, I don't know. Those I'm just naming those because those are the most recent ones, and they're not necessarily my favorite. They're just what I watched, and I enjoyed them.
Nothing wrong with giving Rex. We like
Yeah.
Rex here. I'm a huge Seinfeld fan, so I'm always curious if someone has, like, you have your Friends fans, you have your Office fans, in terms of like the sitcom dramedy, whatever. That was the driver for me, is I always ridiculously huge Seinfeld, and I try not to annoy people with it. So I'm always curious what their favorite TV shows are. Lastly, and this one folks get a kick out of, and I'm glad. If you were a Care Bear, what would be the image depicted on your belly? What would be your Care Bear stare?
Huh. Um, a fish.
Why?
Well, I love the ocean. I love the ocean. I love the color blue. The blue is my favorite color. Actually, the color that you can't see visually in my studio space is the blue near my desk. So blue is my favorite color. I love the ocean. I'm also a Pisces.
Huh.
Um, and yeah, I think a fish with like a pen and a paintbrush in its mouth, or I don't know, fin in its fin, holding a pen in one fin and a paintbrush in another fin would be the
Apropos, who am I to refute that? Let's see if the AI generator DALL-E can do that for
yeah.
you. I'm gonna I'm gonna try. I'm gonna write my best prompt for this Care Bear, I promise. Sort of a signature I came up with for the podcast, and I am not an artist, and I am learning artificial intelligence applications just for me. And so as part of the podcast, the guests are depicted as the Care Bear that they have built for themselves.
Oh.
So we'll see. AI can't. Oscar was so funny. He said AI has its limitations. We all know that. His Care Bear stare was a marijuana leaf. And if you try to put that into if you try to put that into generative AI as it stands today, it won't. Best I could do is look like a little piece of spinach. So if your Care Bear comes out not quite right, we can blame technology.
Yeah.
Not quite right. And that pretty much sums up the I am not prepared diaspora.
Yeah.
It is super off the cuff and super public access. And that's why, you know, I really think the conversation is the authenticity. The conversation is the selling point. And so I cut clips and try to promote it as much as possible. But in the end, folks are going to need to be curious enough to want to check out these convos. And I've had a ball. This is all encompassing of my Albany experience. So thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you again in whatever capacity around town. Um, Thank you so much. And I hope you have a really pleasant Valentine's Day. The sun is out. It's beautiful. And
Yeah.
I hope you can enjoy this day to its fullest.
Thank you. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm grateful for the invitation to come and chat with you. And yeah, I'm also excited to see what AI gives you for my fish.
It's
That'll be
always a
fun.
good time.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna go ahead and leave you, and it's just been a ball. And so I appreciate everything you do, and thank you for being honest and true to who you are. And I'm glad that our conversation unfolded exactly the way it should have. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.